So I just read this to you very quickly, but let me explain a little more about modal jazz. Bebop was about fast-moving progressions and nailing these fast-moving progressions. And giant steps, for example, the evolution of bebop into hard bop was kind of like the pinnacle of that. Very difficult progressions navigating. But this was also musicians saying, you know what, we can go another way with this. We want to kind of create our own progressions within key areas. And so we'll base this area on a certain mode or a certain key. It doesn't mean all you will play is that one chord the whole time, but it means you will kind of create chord progressions within that modal area. It's a little bit like how Debussy played around with modes, but a bit more complicated with that. And it's not the same as it evolved. It evolved more and more and more, and they got more progressive and got more chromatic with their interpretation of these modal interpretations of chord progressions. Oops, sorry. So let's talk about some examples of modal jazz. So with the first Miles Davis quintet, and of course Cannonball Adderley is with it, so it's really a sextet again. Here are two examples of modal pieces. We have this work called Milestones, which is the chord progressions that float around basically the same two key areas. So here's a score to that. So essentially, the whole this is G Dorian. We do here, but it's just all G Dorian, so the improviser could kind of follow it in his own way. He wasn't trapped into a certain chord progression. And then the B section, A, B, A, as I said before. A, see 16 bars, B, A. Now, actually, the B section, this one is actually 16 bars. So it's a little unusual, but it's still A, B, A form. And then the B is basically E Phrygian. Sometimes there's an A pedal, though. The pedal does change. So that's an early example of modal jazz. One of the most famous modal jazz pieces is this work called So What? Often imitated. One of the fun aspects of So What is that the main melody is played by the bass player. And then you literally get this kind of call and response. So it's so what? So you have it for A, B, A. It's in D. That means minor 7, means Dorian. It's in D Dorian for 8 bars, and then D Dorian for another 8 bars, total 16 bars. Then it goes up a half step, E flat Dorian for 8 bars, and then goes back down to D Dorian for 8 bars. That's the entire chord progression. But within those chord progressions, you could kind of search around and discover that mode and that key. And so it's not really just in one chord. You were floating around in that modal area. And it allows the improviser to find new melodic ways, and for the pianist to kind of communicate with whatever the soloist is playing. They can kind of react to where they're taking it. Drummer and bass player too. So let's talk about, hey, John Coltrane again. We went Miles Davis to John Coltrane last time. Well, John Coltrane continued his career after he left Miles Davis's group, and he kept evolving and evolving and evolving. And this is a work called Impressions, which is the same chord progression as So What, although many years later and much more intense. So here's the score for it. So as I said, jazz is about improvisation. If you were only listening to the melody, you were not getting the point. You need to listen to how these people are playing solos. So go listen to So What and listen to how some of them play their solos, how Miles Davis improvises, how Cannonball Adderley or the Bill Evans, I think is the pianist on So What, and John Coltrane plays. In fact, definitely listen to how John Coltrane plays. And now compare to how John Coltrane plays this. The interpretations of the mode go all over the place now. and get very chromatic. They still have those tonal centers, but they're going all over the place. So much more intense. And this last one is showing how modal jazz affected the interpretation of even standards. So here's John Coltrane playing Naima many years later. And of course, as I said, Naima was actually on that Giant Steps album, but now reinterpreted more modally. So they take these chord progressions that are moving very slowly, but within it playing very, very fast, even though it's a slow song. And it shows how modal aspects of playing helps them reinterpret even the older music. Latin jazz. I should just keep making small breaks in the videos.